Welcome
We
to
knew
Heart
that
Tales
we'd be
Hub.
able to make this little
Subscribe,
place a
like,
home.
and comment to join the story. Never could I have foreseen that I would find myself in such a predicament. In a charming little town, I devoted my early years to cultivating dreams of a life brimming with simplicity and happiness. In the vibrant days of our youth, I pledged my love to my college sweetheart, Ben. A bond crafted in the glow of our mutual dreams and ambitions. Even with our limited belongings, the connection we nurtured was invaluable, and that was more than enough. That was the conclusion I had drawn. Looking back, the signs of what was to come have revealed themselves to me. In that instant, it was beyond my comprehension. As we stepped into the charming little house we had decided to rent, I was introduced to Mr. Whittaker, our landlord. The abode may not have exuded magnificence, yet it encapsulated the very spirit of our connection. It exuded a delightful warmth, featuring a quaint garden and a charming little backyard that truly captured my heart. As we stepped into this new chapter of our lives, Ben and I were enveloped by a thrilling wave of excitement. Mr. Whittaker was a gentleman of considerable age, navigating the early chapters of his 6th decade. His face glowed with warmth, a smile perpetually gracing his features during our meetings. He was the kind of landlord who would make the occasional visit to check that everything was in order with the house. The recollection remains vivid of that first encounter when he came to repair the broken fence. He displayed an impressive level of courtesy, asking if we needed anything, while effortlessly weaving in light-hearted discussions about the changes the neighborhood had experienced over the years. In that moment, it hardly made an impression on my thoughts. He was simply a kind, elderly gentleman. Slowly, the current started to change. As Ben's professional obligations drew him away from home more often, I found myself increasingly alone in the tranquil solitude of our house. In these moments, I began to see Mr. Whittaker through a different lens. He began to appear unannounced with growing regularity, sometimes to assess the state of the house, other times merely to partake in conversation. At first, I regarded it as harmless. In the end, he bore the title of our landlord. As the days passed, I began to notice a quiet shift in the cadence of our conversations. On a tranquil afternoon, while I nurtured the blooms in my backyard garden, Mr. Whittaker paid an unanticipated visit. His visits had become more frequent, and though I welcomed his company, there lingered an unsettling aura to his arrivals that I found difficult to dismiss. His kindness enveloped the room, a warm embrace that contrasted sharply with the intensity of his gaze, which ignited a flicker of unease deep within me. On that particular afternoon, he tarried more than he usually did. Our dialogue flowed effortlessly, touching upon the whims of the weather, pausing to admire the garden, and eventually plunging into the profound complexities of existence. In those ephemeral instances, I began to discern a unique fascination in his manner. Is there a sense of joy that you discover within this place? On that day, he asked, his eyes fixed on me, igniting a feeling of vulnerability deep inside. My reply was shrouded in uncertainty. Indeed, a wave of happiness washed over me in Ben's presence. Yet, an unmistakable gap started to emerge, especially with his long hours spent at work. There were instances when solitude wrapped around me, even with him in the house. Yet, I hesitated to articulate that reality to Mr. Whittaker, not openly. I gave a smile and a nod, trying to brush the thought aside, but Mr. Whittaker was relentless, determined to keep it alive. He noted that at times it is all too easy to underestimate the importance of having a confidant, to miss the profound feeling that comes from knowing someone is genuinely listening. Words slipped through my fingers, but the way he spoke them sent a chilling shiver down my spine. His words lingered in the air, resonating well beyond his exit. I brushed it aside, persuading myself that it was nothing more than a fleeting interaction. As Mr. Whittaker continued to visit, I started to notice subtle shifts in his behavior. His compliments, once playful and unburdened, began to carry a weight I was not used to. He would comment on my appearance, observing the care I took in presenting myself and the diligent attention I devoted to maintaining the house. At first, I viewed his actions as simple acts of kindness, but it soon became clear that he possessed an awareness of nuances that eluded the rest of us. On a certain evening, Ben was notably missing, occupied with a business trip. On a serene evening, I was comfortably settled on the couch, lost in the pages of a book, when out of the blue, the doorbell rang. Taken aback by the unforeseen arrival, I hesitated briefly before replying. As I pushed the door ajar, there stood Mr. Whittaker, radiating a warm smile. "I find myself in the vicinity," he said. "So, I thought I would stop by and ensure that all is well." I bestowed a polite smile, stepping back just enough to grant him passage. His unexpected arrivals had settled into a familiar pattern, leaving me to hardly spare them a second glance. He stepped into the living room, and our dialogue began just as it always did. On this particular occasion, an unusual tension lingered in the air. His gaze possessed an eerie intensity that sent a chill coursing through me. It was nothing overt, just a fleeting look and extended gaze. Yet, it was enough to set my heart racing wildly. In the course of our dialogue, Mr. Whittaker drew closer to me than was his usual custom. The space that had long kept us apart started to close, and the weight of his presence became ever more palpable. I remember laughing nervously at his remarks, trying to brush aside the growing discomfort that lodged itself in my heart. I comforted myself with the notion that his actions were simply an expression of camaraderie, persuading myself that my responses were overblown. As if sensing my discomfort, Mr. Whittaker leaned in slightly, his hand resting gently on the arm of the couch. "You know," he remarked, "it's a rare occurrence to meet someone like you, someone who truly listens, someone who sincerely cares." At first glance, the words seemed innocuous, but there was an unsettling quality in his tone, a particular inflection that sent a chill down my spine. An overwhelming desire to withdraw washed over me, a need to voice my unease. Yet I chose to remain mute. Instead, I released a nervous laugh and pulled my legs up to my chest, trying to create a barrier between us, even if it was only a physical one. Mr. Whittaker noted the shift in my posture, and for a brief instant, an unvoiced tension lingered in the atmosphere surrounding us. He looked at me, his eyes soft, but there remained a sharp intensity that I could not ignore. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he murmured, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Your gratitude is genuinely cherished, Emma. You embody a distinctive and extraordinary spirit." The way he spoke my name rendered me momentarily speechless. My heart pounded fiercely in my chest, rendering me speechless. I longed to speak to break the heavy stillness that surrounded us, but the perfect word slipped through my fingers. In that moment, I was captivated and rendered motionless by the very burden of time. Before I could even begin to speak, Mr. Whittaker stood up. With a smile reappearing on his face, he said, "I suppose I should allow you to return to your evening." Still, an oddity resided within the smile, an elusive essence that slipped through my grasp of comprehension. "I wanted to connect and check in on how you've been faring." I nodded, my throat dry, and watched him as he left the house. With the soft click of the door closing behind him, I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I was holding. I sat still, my eyes locked on the door as time appeared to elongate endlessly, wrestling with the perplexing occurrences that had just transpired. Never had I encountered such a deep and unsettling conflict within myself. A part of me longed to share my inner turmoil with Ben, while another was held captive by shame, paralyzed by the dread of his possible judgment. I never meant to cause any problems. I sought to steer clear of sowing any seeds of uncertainty in his thoughts, or even more perilously inciting his wrath. As I continued to reflect, it became unmistakably evident that I could no longer ignore the feelings Mr. Whittaker was awakening in me. A sense of wrongness enveloped me, and I found no inclination to nurture it. An unsettling intuition persisted, hinting that his visits masked deeper truths he opted to keep hidden. What was I supposed to do? As the days unfolded, Mr. Whittaker's visits became more and more frequent. Each time I returned, the same unsettling tide of discomfort and unease enveloped me anew. I tried to brush it aside, but it became ever more challenging to ignore. He had a mysterious allure that quickened my pulse, leaving me bewildered by its source. I recognized the importance of prudence, conscious that I could not permit events to unravel unchecked. Yet, I felt that beneath the surface a transformation was subtly taking shape. Little did I know of the profound depths that lay ahead of me. As the days transformed into weeks, the tension between Mr. Whittaker and me grew ever more palpable. I had not yet confided in Ben about the strange encounters I had with our landlord. A part of my essence quivered at the mere notion that he might fail to understand my intentions, or even more terrifyingly, that he could react with fury and disillusionment. Ultimately, I was simply trying to offer a gesture of goodwill, wasn't I? It was nothing more than a light exchange of words. Is that all there is, then? I recited that mantra to myself each time Mr. Whittaker appeared at the house unannounced, striving to push away the growing sense of unease that was slowly taking hold. Nevertheless, the discomfort had transformed into an unmistakable force that I could no longer ignore. The memory of Mr. Whittaker remained vivid in my thoughts, especially the moment our eyes locked, and the fleeting touch of his fingers against the armrest of the couch during that one extraordinary visit. It seemed he was extending a hand, striving to create a connection that went beyond the typical confines of neighborly or landlord-tenant interactions. That moment kept resurfacing in my mind, each remembrance amplifying the tension within me. On a tranquil Tuesday evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen, carefully slicing vegetables in anticipation of dinner. Cooking had always brought me joy, but tonight it felt more like a burden than a source of solace. My thoughts drifted to far-off places, an uneasy feeling tugging at my consciousness, as if the very atmosphere was alive with the anticipation of transformation on the horizon. As I started to dust the chicken with spices, the familiar sound of the doorbell resonated in the atmosphere. My heart danced within my chest. As I peered through the kitchen window, I caught sight of Mr. Whittaker at the door, his well-known warm smile illuminating his features. Days had slipped by since I last beheld him, and though relief ought to have enveloped me, an unsettling knot coiled tightly in my stomach instead. With my hands dried on a towel, I took a deep breath and made my way toward the door. "Good evening, Emma," Mr. Whittaker said with a bright tone as I opened the door. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything currently in progress." "Certainly not," I replied, forcing a smile. I stepped aside to allow him passage, and he entered with a nonchalance that implied it was the most commonplace action conceivable. He glanced around swiftly, his eyes briefly settling on the kitchen where I had been immersed in the task of preparing dinner. "The aroma in here is delightful," he commented, his gaze resting on the dish I was crafting. I received the compliment with a courteous nod, a wave of uncertainty washing over me as I pondered my response. "It's just a simple dinner, nothing particularly remarkable." "You always say that," Mr. Whittaker chuckled, "but you have a remarkable talent for transforming the simplest things into something truly extraordinary." The compliment was agreeable, I suppose. Yet it bore a different significance when it originated from him. It stood apart from the accolades I had garnered from friends or even from Ben. His gaze carried a weight, as if he sensed something within me that went beyond the simple worries of food or a roof over my head. A tide of discomfort surged within me again, but I resolved to push the feeling away. "Thank you," I responded, brushing it aside with a casual wave of my hand. "Do you need anything? I assume you've arrived to seek some information." Mr. Whittaker's expression shifted ever so slightly. He seemed to hesitate for a brief moment before responding. I would appreciate the opportunity for a short discussion. A considerable period has passed since we last partook in a significant exchange of thoughts. To my utter surprise, our meetings had consistently been characterized by courteous interactions, but we had never paused to delve into a more profound conversation. I had noticed his regular appearances nearby, but I had not expected him to seek a deeper dialogue. A wave of anxiety washed over me, but I nodded nonetheless. Certainly, we can pause for a moment to share this space together. I led him into the living room, subtly gesturing toward the couch, encouraging him to settle in and find comfort. As I settled into my familiar chair, I found myself facing him. A routine that had become a cherished part of our evening spent immersed in our television rituals. A tense silence settled over the room until Mr. Whittaker shattered it, his voice imbued with a gravity I had never witnessed in him before. He commenced his journey at a relaxed tempo. Of late, I have been immersed in profound contemplation regarding the essence of existence and the inexorable changes that manifest as time progresses. It is all too easy to find oneself caught in the repetitive patterns of everyday existence, drifting away from the genuine essence of what truly matters. A sense of unease enveloped me as I contemplated the path he was choosing to follow. With thoughtful deliberation, I acknowledged your viewpoint. In the midst of life's chaos, remaining connected to what genuinely holds significance can prove to be a formidable task. Mr. Whittaker tilted his head, his eyes searching deep into mine. Exactly. Yet it is just as important to take a moment to pause and contemplate, making certain that we are truly living life instead of simply going through the motions of a routine. His words bore a disquing gravity, rendering me speechless in the face of how to respond. My thoughts were shrouded in doubt as I contemplated his suggestion, and a fragment of my being faltered at the prospect of revealing the truth. "Emma," he whispered softly, leaning in just a fraction closer to her. It's challenging to express. Yet, from the instant our paths crossed, an unmistakable bond formed between us. A distinctive connection that remains etched in my mind. Time and again, I've pondered our conversations. The way you carry yourself, your extraordinary nature is ineffable, and my respect for you is profound. A sudden constriction seized my throat, stifling my breath. His words enveloped the listener in a soft embrace, while simultaneously echoing the profound significance of a newfound truth. The way he spoke those words struck a chord within me, though it was anything but a comforting feeling. An unexpected surge of confinement enveloped me, casting doubt on my forthcoming actions. My thoughts swelled, probing for the perfect phrases, anything that could alleviate the dense tension now palpable in the atmosphere. I find myself at a loss for words," I murmured, my voice scarcely lifting above a whisper. "I appreciate your thoughtful sentiments, Mr. Whittaker, but I must convey that I am blissfully wed. My heart is devoted to a husband I hold in the highest regard." He seemed completely unperturbed by my words. He settled back in his chair, studying me closely for a fleeting instant, his expression an enigmatic facade. "I understand," he murmured, a trace of regret coloring his voice. "It is my desire to spare you any unease, Emma, but I find myself unable to dismiss the feelings that dwell within me." His words coursed through me, a spark of electricity awakening every nerve. Though I had heard him express his admiration for me before, this moment carried a unique weight. In his gaze resided a profound depth, an intensity that conveyed unspoken narratives. A wave of dread and uncertainty enveloped me. This had surpassed the boundaries of a simple casual inquiry from a friendly landlord. It had transformed into a labyrinth of intricacies, a realm I realized I was unprepared to traverse. "I have no intention of creating any discord between you and your husband," Mr. Whittaker said, his voice unwavering. "Yet, I can no longer pretend to be indifferent to the undeniable attraction. I feel for you. I felt compelled to share my emotions with you." Words slipped through my fingers. I opened my mouth, but the words slipped away from me. I found myself in a precarious situation, caught between the urge to shield him and the necessity of refraining from giving him false hope with hollow assurances. What path was I intended to follow in this dilemma? What is the best way to communicate to him that I am married and have no interest in pursuing anything outside of my relationship with Ben? Finally, I took a deep breath, sensing my heart pounding in my chest. "Mr. Whittaker," I declared with firm resolve, "I value your candor, but I must be clear and direct with you. I stand united in the sacred bond of marriage, wholly devoted to my husband. Your kindness is genuinely valued. However, I must emphasize that my interest is strictly confined to the parameters of a landlord-tenant relationship." A prolonged stillness enveloped the room, and I caught a flicker of disappointment shimmering in his gaze. He lowered his eyes to his hands, then nodded with a thoughtful precision. "I understand," he whispered gently. "I sincerely regret if my actions have brought you any unease. That was never my intention." I nodded, a surge of relief washing over me. The tension that once surrounded us seemed to dissipate, leaving behind a lingering sense of discomfort in its aftermath. The feeling remained an inescapable burden, that nothing would revert to its previous condition. Mr. Whittaker's feelings for me would endure, no matter how much I might wish to face them. He stood up and I followed suit. "Thank you for listening," he said, his voice soft, carrying a hint of sadness. "I take my leave now, wishing you a pleasant evening. I wish for you to know that I deeply respect your boundaries, Emma. I merely desire to express my emotions to you." I forced a smile, striving to mask the chaos that turned beneath the surface. "I expressed my gratitude, Mr. Whittaker. I eagerly anticipate the moment our paths intertwine once more." As he crossed the threshold, I paused for a heartbeat, staring into the emptiness he had vacated. A whirlwind of ideas churned inside me. The events that had just unfolded were utterly beyond my grasp. Even while bound in matrimony to Ben, I discovered myself entangled in a dialogue with our landlord. What was unfolding? And why did it appear that my entire being was slowly unraveling at the edges? I shook my head, attempting to cast away the persistent uncertainties. I found myself drawn to the essence of my life with Ben, yearning to remember the love and commitment we once cherished. Still, an unyielding murmur deep within me hinted that this was just the dawn of something far more significant. After my conversation with Mr. Whittaker, I made a concerted effort to push the entire situation from my mind. My resolve to maintain my relationship with Ben was unwavering, and I had no intention of introducing further complications with our landlord. Nevertheless, in spite of my attempts to mask my feelings, they remained stubbornly clinging to my heart. The burden of guilt and uncertainty lingered, snaring me in an endless cycle of doubt about the meeting. A few days later, Mr. Whittaker re-emerged in an unforeseen manner. A sudden wave of unease washed over me as the doorbell's chime pierced the stillness. Even though I sensed my lack of readiness for yet another challenging conversation, I recognized the necessity of facing it head-on. I eased the door ajar, making an effort to uphold my composure. "Salutations, Emma," he greeted me, his voice warm yet composed. "I wish to connect and ensure that all is well with the house." I tilted my head slightly, summoning a smile. "Everything is in order, Mr. Whittaker. Thank you for your question." He seemed to hesitate for a brief moment before continuing on. "I have been contemplating my earlier expressions with great intensity. Causing you any discomfort was never my intention. I recognize your boundaries, and I respect them." I found myself compelled to articulate the thoughts swirling within me. I stared at him for a long while, feeling the weight of the words he had spoken. In that moment, I felt the necessity to stand my ground. Here, uncertainty found no refuge. "Thank you for your understanding," I replied. "Nevertheless, I feel compelled to be clear. I find myself in a bond of matrimony. I am fully committed to my marriage with Ben, and I will not allow any distractions to disrupt this bond." While I value the professional relationship we have cultivated, it remains solely within that realm. Mr. Whittaker's expression softened, though a hint of sadness remained in his eyes. He tilted his head slowly, absorbing my words in quietude. "I comprehend," he whispered gently. "I sincerely regret if I overstepped any boundaries." A deep breath filled my lungs and a soothing wave of relief enveloped me. "It is entirely acceptable. I would like to ensure that we are on the same page." He bestowed a subtle, courteous nod before making his exit. As he turned to depart, I remained in the threshold, watching his exit. A tempest of feelings churning inside me. A flicker of melancholy settled in my heart, recognizing the importance of this moment, while simultaneously a wave of gratitude unfurled for the boundaries I had so urgently needed to create. As twilight descended, Ben and I convened at the dinner table. And in that instant, I felt a deep sense of presence that had long been absent from my life. The recent events weighed heavily on my thoughts, but I recognized the importance of moving forward. I discovered a compelling attraction to the core of what genuinely holds significance. The essence of my family, my steadfast devotion to Ben, and the deep affection that intertwined our lives. "Is everything okay?" Ben asked, noting that I appeared more reserved than usual. I presented a smile, striving to dispel the relentless thoughts that clung to my consciousness, truly immersed in deep thought. "Your return home fills me with joy." He reciprocated the smile, his hold on my hand firming softly. There exists a soothing warmth in the act of returning to the cherished embrace of home. In that moment, it became clear to me that amidst the turmoil and complexities of human emotions, my focus was strikingly sharp. A deep sense of duty urged me to protect the connection I had with Ben. With unwavering resolve, I was determined to allow neither obstacles nor individuals to hinder our journey. Fully cognizant that despite the trials that lay before us, we would face them together.